Welcome back to Top Talk TV, where everything comes off the top. Today we're going to be reacting to African American invention and how they advanced America. The reason why we're doing this is because it's Black History Month here in the States, and I thought it would be nice for us to do at least each week do a Black History Month video. And today this is the video.
Okay.
All right, y'all ready?
Ready?
Let's do it.
All right.
It would be difficult for people to prove intellectual inferiority. That's why even in our textbooks in school, they don't like to teach our children about Black inventions. Because even greater than our African history are our American inventions. Because from nowhere, you're coming up with things that revolutionize the American social and economic order.
Well, basically, there is a proverb that says that the only thing that peoples of European descent ever created was the patent office, because they stole everybody else's ideas and put their name on it.
During slavery, because you were the property of your master, a lot of what we invented was automatically given credit to the master. The credit was forwarded to the master because we was property. We weren't allowed to take fame or notoriety for the things we created.
Anything that made work easier. Why would white people want to invent something that make work easier when they have black folks to do it?
You have a huge incentive to try to get things to move smoothly, so that you don't get any more lashes, or somebody doesn't now have to sell someone else in your family. There was a lot of incentive to create invention.
And that's another thing. Most of our Black inventors had to deal with idea theft. White folks would come in and say, we did it first because we didn't necessarily know the process or have the money to patent our inventions. So white folk will find out what a Black person invented and go do it real fast and get their application in, because back then the process wasn't as thorough as it is now. Whoever got their application in first to the patent office, that's who got the patent. So we got thousands of inventions by Black people. We'll never even know it because of the fact that they were stolen.
They don't want anyone to know that we invented things. So if it wasn't for Black people, white people couldn't take a dump. A Black man invented the toilet, and he just made it white on purpose.
A slave by the name of Black Sam, Eli Whitney slave, created the idea for the cotton gin, and his master took it and patented in his own name. How could he do that with no benefit of books? He wasn't even allowed to learn.
A lot of people assume just because African slaves were illiterate, they were ignorant. And there's a real big difference, because African people, they had a very elaborate language or elaborate languages over in Africa. When Africans were brought over here, they were taught a bastardized version of English, and they weren't even allowed to see the language written down. And they were taught the language by lower class Europeans who were living in the South. So even though there was that major obstacle, Blacks still did phenomenal things. Thomas Edison was known for stealing people's inventions. He was known for taking the inventions of a few African American inventors. Lewis Latimer, Granville T. Woods actually went to court with Thomas Edison, and Granville T. Woods actually won his case.
Thomas Edison tried to bring Granville T. Woods to court on that invention. And I just saw a commercial for Mazda, I believe, cars, where they said, here's a man holding 1,000 patents. Well, 90% of them he stole.
Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison, who are probably considered America's two greatest inventors of all time. But guess who was designing their blueprints for the patent application? A Black man. Now let's think about this for a minute. If you invent something, why do you need me to do the blueprints for the patent application? If it's your idea, how in the hell can I do the blueprints for it? You can't do the blueprints for my idea. I have to do them. So if Latimer is doing the blueprints, if he is your chief draftsman, and he's doing your blueprints for your patent application, Alexander Graham Bell, did you invent the telephone, or did Lewis Latimer invent the telephone?
Thomas Edison had a whole troop of people that was in his sweatshop, and depending on the invention, he would hand it over to that particular department and tell them, see what it is that does, and then do something a little different, and we'll patent that. And when he took Granville T. Woods' information and tried to make it his own, the court said no.
The watermelon and black people stereotype, that came and that was popularized by Thomas Edison. Around 1890, Thomas Edison put together this Nickelodeon reel. There were these African American men who were joking around, shucking and jiving and kind of mugging for the camera, and they were eating watermelon. And Edison filmed this, put this out, and the general public saw this and they said, okay, African American people must really love watermelon. And right after that film came out, thousands of postcards and all types of memorabilia flooded the market of African American people eating watermelon. So that watermelon stereotype was popularized by Thomas Edison.
A lot of people don't know there's an African American male who is significant, has patents on the first major computer chips that made computers operate.
Other inventors that we don't know about, essentially, who they call the father of the internet, was Philip Emeagwali, a Nigerian man who essentially created the connection for quantum bits of information so that multiple computers could actually communicate with one another.
During slavery, and this is well documented by white people, many of the masters, when they were sick, did not call for the physician. They called for the big mama on the plantation, and she would come with her medicine bag that didn't have alcohol and rum. It had all types of things that she made from the herbs that she had planted. Some of them said, I don't want the doctor. Bring me the witch doctor, that voodoo woman who I own.
Africans took what they brought from Africa, which would be a ground hockey, and all they did apply the game to ice.
When the British were fighting the United States, there were African slaves or former slaves assisting the British in fighting the U.S. When the U.S. won and the Britons lost, many of the African Americans were sent to British colonies in West Africa, and many of the African Americans were sent into Nova Scotia, Canada. And they formed what we now know as hockey. They started to play this new game called hockey, which was something that Africans were doing in Africa. In ancient Kemet, there was a form of field hockey that they were playing. And they went into Canada and they created what we now know as hockey. And there were actually black Canadian hockey teams in the early sport of hockey that a lot of people don't know about. And there's a great book about that called Black Ice that talks about the early inventors of hockey who were men of African descent.
The baddest cowboy, black or white. This man was so bad that they called him the Invincible One. Just to say that there was nobody badder than this man in the West, and that's been co-signed. The brother's name was Bass Reeves. Now, Bass Reeves was a former slave who pretty much beat up on his master to get away.
When we think of runaway African slaves, we always think of the Africans sneaking away in the middle of the night, hiding, ducking and dodging behind trees, hiding in bushes, hiding in rivers. Bass Reeves decided he was not going to be a slave anymore, and not only was he not going to be a slave, he told his master, I'm going to beat you up before I leave. So he beat up his master, escaped and got away and went into Oklahoma, which was like an outlaw territory. So he actually got away and became very prominent in the Old West.
When they began to open up the Oklahoma territory, they needed to recruit people. And they recruited him because he knew the Creek language, he knew the Muskogee, he knew how to speak the Seminole language. He knew all of the natives of the area, and he sat with them to learn about their traditions. The real life of this black man, Bass Reeves, became the mythic legends of Hollywood white cowboys. He brought in 3,000, count them, 3,000 bad guys. I'm talking about the worst murderers. He got 3,000 of them, killed 14. All of who the Lone Ranger became when you saw him on TV was actually the life of Bass Reeves.
African people, in many ways, the Underground Railroad established African people moving west and establishing places to be able to protect them. And so in the study and the research of the Underground Railroad, you will find that there are African-American communities that were established and have been there from before people can actually talk about it historically.
Many people don't realize that African-American people founded and settled many cities around the country. Buffalo, New York was founded by a black man. They called him Black Joe Hodges. Many African-American people had a less volatile relationship with the Native Americans. A lot of the European settlers, they were beefing with the Native Americans. so they couldn't go into certain areas peacefully. But a lot of African American settlers would go in there, and they had somewhat of a camaraderie with the Native American people. In Los Angeles, 44 African American families came to Los Angeles and founded Los Angeles. The governor of what was then known as Alta, California, which is now the state of California, the governor was a man of African descent named T.O.P. And there's a street out here in Los Angeles called Pico Boulevard named after him. You had an African American woman named Biddy Mason, who was a very wealthy landowner in early Los Angeles. So African American people were very prominent in founding many cities around America.
Chicago was a city founded by Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, a brother of Haitian background coming up through and founding this city, Chicago, because that is what the indigenous people called it in this part of Illinois. Now, Seneca Village really is a misnomer for Senegal Village. Seneca Village was a community in New York City that was purchased by freed Africans when the enslavement of African people was abolished in 1827. Senegal Village became a meeting place for African people in general. The backstory, it is believed that Senegal Village became part of the Underground Railroad for African peoples. Starting in 1855, you're going to have people start to call it a shanty town, where people who are squatters live. They're going to demean the importance of Senegal Village. Going to say, you see all these African people moving up in here, and they're squatters, they don't belong there, and we need to create a park. And so they begin to put themselves upon the people. Finally, the mayor signs an edict saying, eminent domain, you got to get out. And so by 1857, the last Africans were forcibly removed from their homes.
What's interesting about Central Park, it was once an African American community, Seneca Village, and now there's an ancient African monument. There's an obelisk in Central Park right now that's from ancient Africa, from ancient Kemet, and a lot of people don't even realize it's there.
A lot of people think that the enslavement of African people was only down south. That's not true. The largest plantation in the 13 colonies at one point in history was in Brooklyn, New York. And you know that area down there, down by Battery Park, where they used to bring the ships into that area, the port. And they would dock the ships, and they would bring the Africans up out the ships, and they would walk them across to be sold. However, what they did was, because they couldn't sell all of them, they used to put them in different prisons along this particular path. And then they would march the Africans that they were ready to sell down the street. Down a street called Wall Street. Down into a place we today call the New York Stock Exchange. African people were the first stocks and bonds sold on the stock exchange. There's a movie by Bruce Willis that will show you the prisons that are underground the stock exchange building.
Wiley Jones was a former African American slave who went into Arkansas. He stacked his money up and he became a railroad owner. He owned a railroad system, and the city of Pine Bluff, Arkansas ended up buying his railroad system, and that system is still owned by Pine Bluff right now. The Patterson Car Company was a car company founded by former slaves, African American men, and the Patterson Car Company was the first African American car manufacturer in the country, I think the only manufacturer in the country. And what's interesting about the Patterson Car Company, it was in Ohio. Their cars were considered higher quality than the Model T cars that Henry Ford had.
The DeRay brothers, Ford and them stole it. That's why all over the world, Ford never gets credit for inventing a car. He gets credit for mass production.
The cars began coming off the assembly line at the rate of 1 every 40 seconds. Until
that, they take one car and put it together. One car and put it together. But where did he get that from? George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was never around black folks till he went to Tuskegee. His mother and father died or was killed. And a white family adopted him from Iowa. You know, black folks in Iowa, except football players. So he went to grade school, high school, and they didn't have no secondary school. They didn't have enough people. And so now George Washington Carver leaves after he get all this education come out there. He goes to Tuskegee. Henry Ford came down to visit, like he always see his friend. And he said, Mr. Ford, I got something here. Study plants. And so if you take this back and give it to your engineers, they can build more than one car at a time. He took it back. Mass production all over the world is called the plant, right?
Everybody made joke of him because they said, well, you know, what, the plants are talking to him? You know, is this how he's getting these properties of these plants? And George Washington Carver, in his quiet, dignified way, said, well, who taught me? I'm not saying that they talk to me like they got a tongue, but I can look at a plant and see what it can do for the human family.
The military came to George Washington Carver and they said, we need you to do something for us. Can you invent something that out of it we can get paint, glue, ink, and plastic? Yeah, I can handle it. They tell me how smart black folk are. I can handle it. So he came back, called soybean. Now you want to hear something funny? The #1 cancer group in America is vegetarians. Because you wasn't supposed to eat soy. When he got to Tuskegee, they thought he was gay. No association with women, high-pitched voice, they thought he was gay.
The finest use we've been able to make of peanuts is in the treatment of the after effects of infantile paralysis.
And he'd rather for you to believe he was gay than tell you that them white folks that adopted him castrated him so he couldn't have sex with their daughter. Like, who wanted them, huh? Did you see King Kong, New York City, Empire State Building? That's about Jack Johnson and the white ladies. Why would the gorilla go to New York? They ain't got no bananas and Lord, no ain't no trees. Why did they go there? The boxing capital of the world is Madison Square Garden. If you don't know how to break it down, you
Johnson controlling the pace of the fight.
We have to understand that in our celebration of Jack Johnson and that one-on-one, mano a mano, man, this is you and me, and this is what we're going to deal with. There were lynchings the day after every fight. And that's very important to understand as it relates to the psychology. He used to love to drive. He used to love to speed. And he'd be speeding someplace and the police would stop him. And because they saw that he was a person of African descent, because they saw the car that he was driving, some may have known who he was, but they said, well, what this man got doing with this car? They would fine him. They say, okay, we're gonna give you a ticket for speeding. Here's the $500 ticket. $500 for speeding back then? Story has it he'd give him $1,000. He said, because I'm speeding back.
In the sport of boxing, there has always been a need for the great white hope in boxing. Since there could not be one in real life, Hollywood just created one, and that's what the Rocky movies were about.
They were giving out the awards in Rocky 1, okay, the Oscar. And Muhammad Ali came out, and he was the one that gave Sylvester Stallone the award.
But can't you see I'm working? I'm the real Apollo Creed. You stole my ship.
And Ali, in his most powerful way, came out and said, you know that story was about me. He said, you know that was about me. You know that y'all dream about beating a black man. He said, but you know what? The only place you'll ever do it is in Hollywood.
Wow, Troy, wow.
One day I got these discs of Jack Johnson. I'm just gonna download them onto a thumb drive so you can watch it. It's like a 4-disc series that PBS did. So you can understand Jack Johnson's whole story, the boxer guy.
Yeah.
He was an incredible dude. He was an incredible dude.
This whole video is incredible.
Yes, yes.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the same thing with George Washington Carver, yeah. They adopted him, but they castrated him because they didn't want him sleeping with the girls.
I remember when I was doing my research on that,
Yeah.
it was stated that it was because he was born sickly.
No. Watch
I didn't research deep enough,
Yeah,
though. So I didn't research deep enough.
But Carver did a lot for
Wow, yeah,
with those damn plants. So,
right.
Yeah. They touched on so many great things. And the reason why I wanted to do this video for us for Black History Month is because I think parents, there's going to be a description of this in there. And for those parents who want their kids to learn a little bit more than they do in their school classes, and then you guys can do your own family research on the computer of some of the people that he's displayed on here for us. So that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, that was great, and that was very eye-opening.
Yeah.
And you know, it's something I think about all the time is why isn't the positive of Black people shown more? It's always like the chaos side of things, right? And but just and I do know why. I do know why. We've talked about these things before. But just to see this, like, it's so. First of all, it was motivating. I was like, like it was eye opening. It was a wow factor for me, right? And then it was motivating. And then I was like, and I was thinking and feeling the whole time we're watching this, like, this is what I want to see. This is the energy that I need to feed off of. You
our
know,
Black excellence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. Like, wow.
And another one of my favorite guys on here is, I'm so glad they, you got to see it on here, but there was a show I was so glad that they described this story too, of Bass Reeves. If anybody watches HBO, the Watchmen series that HBO did last year, they bring in the whole Oklahoma, Tulsa massacre where all the Black folks in that town in Tulsa that got killed, Black Wall Street. They bring that in there, and they also tie in Bass Reeves. And Bass Reeves was a bad MF. And like I say, that's where you get your Lone Ranger story from. They just changed the names, changed the identity, and you know what I mean? But he is a real historical person. But I'm so glad I grew up in a family to where my parents and uncles and aunts and all of them all like to read stories from different histories of our culture and stuff. And so I was taught a lot of what they're talking on here. I was taught a lot of it earlier. I am, like I say, I have an art card. I am a Panther kid. I was part of those Black Panther programs that they had out there. So reading and all that strong stuff is a part of my DNA. It's just part of who I am.
That's great.
You know,
That's great.
had to put this out here for Black History Month. Like I said, we're going to try to do one once a week for the month of February. So y'all stay tuned for that. We're going to try to find the best content we can. So thanks again for watching. And thank you, sis, for
thank you
sitting
for the
here
intro.
and plucking a few things. I got a few surprises for you.
Right, I'm looking forward. But so just to get your perspective, Troy, how do you feel about seeing the cover up? Like, what, you know,
it's a natural progression to me. When you don't want certain things out, or if you want to make society think a certain way about a group of people, whoever they are. Right now, a lot of people in our country are picking on Arab people. But at one point, it was Black people catching hell all the time, or they picking on Asian people, or the Latino people. But at one point, America's favorite person they like to kick is us, which is, it is what it is. I ain't crying over the shit, but we're resilient people. Like I tell people all the time, every time Black culture in America invents something and everybody tries to copy it, like the whole blues and rock and roll and jazz, and everybody come in, and right now it's hip hop. You can't be mad at everybody. It's a popular thing. It's going around the world right now. But give us a little bit more time. We'll invent some new stuff again. So you can keep having all the jazz, blues, rock and roll, hip hop. It don't matter. This culture is always going to create something beautiful and good for the world to enjoy, as far as music sonically and stuff like that. So I tell people all the time, don't get mad at some of the things that got co-opted. You just keep doing what you're doing. And like Nasheed was saying on here, a lot of those people weren't ignorant. They just couldn't read. You know, they couldn't pick up a book and learn how to read. So they had other ways to show their intellect.
Right.
So you got to always keep that in mind. Just because somebody isn't book smart, they have other talents. I don't look at a person and assume something about them.
Right.
Because I've surprised so many people so many times before for them just looking at me and assuming something. So I try never to do that with people.
Right.
I don't care if you're disabled, what some people will say, mentally retarded or whatever. I give everybody a chance. Until you prove to me that you're an a-hole, you get a chance with me.
Right.
You get a chance with me.
Right.
Because I'm going to look at you for the person that you are, and the way you treat me, I'm going to give back to you.
Right.
And if you're too negative with me too many times, I'll just steer clear of you because you're not giving me good energy.
Right.
So, but I try to always do that. And if I ever catch somebody around me doing something where they're not giving that person a chance, I'll be like, well, slow your roll, dude. You ain't all that perfect a person either now.
Right.
None of us are, so we're all a work in progress.
And so these choices that white people made in those times to like take the inventions and is it? I mean,
because they can do it.
Greed,
That's why,
obviously, but was it also fear?
You weren't. This person don't know that what they're doing is great. I can take it, make some money off it, and keep them in the station that I want to keep them in. That's just a part of nature. That's just how it is.
I don't like how that sounds. I don't like how that sounds at all.
That's just how this world goes. That's just how this world goes.
But isn't that a problem?
It's a problem.
That's a problem.
And we're slowly fixing it. We're slowly fixing it.
Are we? Because I kind of feel like these days, like
you gotta look at the glass full, half full instead of half empty.
And you know what? But I do that. I do that a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always very optimistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I just see like this self-destruction factor happening. Like we're to the point where, like when I read history and when I read African American history, the people from the history books that are talked about, they fought peacefully. They fought by
civil rights and all that stuff.
Right, or even just on a day-to-day basis. It wasn't like violence. It wasn't like, let me come at you the same way you're coming at me. It was always a higher level of the comeback. I'm still going to be respectful. I'm still going to be kind, even though you treat me like shit.
You can't be like the people. You can't be like the people that you're trying to correct.
And I know some of it was out of fear, and because of the laws back then, you had to carry yourself a certain way. But then I also, know that the bigger picture was, kindness was their biggest strength, and then success was their biggest strength. I don't see that these days. Like what I see on TV, social media, and everyday lives, I just see so much like there's just anger that doesn't need to be there, but it's there, and like I don't see why. Maybe because it's the way I'm thinking, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not allowing society to influence
show you different facets
right,
of itself.
and to teach me how to treat others. I don't allow society to do that, so maybe that's something I have to look at as well. But I feel like we're self-destructing. We're all self-destructing, and it's always about the look these days and the money. That's what I see the most everywhere now. It's how can I make my, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the class of how to do it, or of how to be successful, of how to communicate, of how to win is
a lot of those Rockefellers, Getty, all those people, they stepped on a lot of people, black, white, didn't matter. They stepped on a lot of people, Carnegie, they stepped on a lot of people to get to where they were. So Rockefellers, all of them, they stepped on a lot of people to get there. It didn't matter what color he was. I need a larger chunk of this pie. And then if I get the larger chunk of this pie, I can show you all the way. That's what they think. And like I said before to you in another video, it's just human nature. That's just how we're made up. And you can't
it's just so disappointing.
Remember the stuff that happened and try not ever to let those things happen again, but you can't dwell on it. Like I said, I'm a realist and I try to be optimistic. But I look at things for what they are. This is what you're showing me. All right, this is what it is. You're telling me what the rules are right here. And you're showing me when you do these things. You're showing me what potential, how things can potentially turn out. But that's not going to deter me from following my course to get to wherever I need to get to. I'll just need to avoid you in some areas and work with you in some areas that we can work together, but I'm not going to get involved with all that. I'm going to be optimistic on what direction I'm moving in, what direction I see the country or family or your neighborhood. You got to push it that way. That's why I say one person at a time. Just touch one person at a time. When they get it, they touch another person. They touch another person. Before you know, it's not going to be a fast thing. But all you got to do is get to one. Once you get to that person, they find their one. They find their one. That's the only way it's going to work. Don't worry about what the people who aren't participating in it yet. Eventually, they may never come around, but hopefully their children come around. So some people you just got to write off. That's just who they are, how they get down. That's the way it is. As long as it's not disrupting anything that you're doing, let them do whatever they need to do. Just don't bring that over here, because then we got to handle that.
Right.
We got to handle that.
Right.
But keep teaching, hopefully. And that's another thing I like too, that I've always, not always, lately in the past 15, 20 years, every neighborhood that I've lived in was super diverse. Super diverse, so there's all types of people learning from all types of people. And I like it like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a neighborhood where there's just black people or a neighborhood where there's just white people. I want a good mix of, that's why I like living out here. Because there's always a good mix of people out in the Bay. So,
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
You gotta be positive though. 'Cause it's easy to go, remember I was saying it's easy to be negative? It's easy to think the negative thought too. But if you kind of like say, all right, I see you negative, but you ain't stopping me from thinking about this positive stuff and being an example in this positive lane.
Right.
That's the best way. Don't forget about what they do, but don't dwell on it too much. It takes up too much of your energy.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. It's just, it can be a bit much when it's in abundance. You know what I mean? You're just like boom, boom, everywhere.
Take that social media off.
Absolutely.
Take that, instead of watching that news program, put you on a comedy, something. That's why I'll ask you sometimes. Did you do something nice for yourself today? Did you make yourself laugh today?
Right.
That's your responsibility.
Absolutely.
It ain't other people's job to make you happy. So that's your job. So every now and then put something in funny to make you laugh, because you need that today.
Right.
So.
Wow.
Great video. Thank you guys for watching our first Black History Month video with us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And
follow our social media.
Yep. And check those notifications, and we'll see you next time on Top Talk TV.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.